Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated. This is our podcast where every week we talk about robots, how to build them. We spitball a robot into existence. I, of course, am Stefan Ilia, co-founder and CEO of Polymath Robotics. And the man across from me is wearing both a gray pair of jeans and a nondescript gray t-shirt. When I find myself dressing this way, you know, someone wearing all blue, like someone on my team is currently doing, I'd say when I'm dressed in all blue, I look like a blueberry. Whereas this man across from me in all gray, I think you look like a grayberry, which would be a very unappetizing treat to get at Whole Foods.
For listeners just joining, we do start every episode with a critique of my wardrobe because Stefan has dreams of being a fashion critic.
I'm going right to America's Next Top Model.
Yeah, basically. But no, the added bonus was I had baby spit up on, still have a little bit on my shoulder.
Ooh, it's a good look. It's in this season.
So it is. That and the frazzled hair just speaks parenthood. Didn't have time to pick my clothing.
Listen, parenthood is so hot right now.
Is it? I was unaware.
This is Automated Polymath Robotics weekly podcast. We do two sections of this podcast. The first, we each draw a card at random and then have to spitball a robot into existence. And then the second section, we're going to talk about some topic in robotics. Ilia, what topic are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about why you can't just write code once and expect it to work forever, generally speaking, but especially in robotics.
That sounds like horse manure to me. I think it should just work forever. And I've had everyone on the team say that they're never going to write a bad line of code again. So with that being said, let's get it going. Let's play our game. And I'm drawing a card. Look at this humanoid robot.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I didn't know you would.
We may or may not have been talking about humanoid robots over a coffee earlier.
Yeah. And I continue my tirade against legs. Beach is the first one I drew.
Beach?
Yes.
Humanoid robots at the beach?
Yeah, because everybody knows legs excel at walking across sand and water, you know.
And there's a lot of good business cases at the beach.
Yeah, for humanoids.
Yeah. I mean, just in general for technology. Like when people go to the beach, they want robots and apps.
All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a robot lifeguard.
No.
That also can be on Muscle Beach and bench press more than everybody there.
So that's one, but I have a particular beach memory that I think tech could finally solve for me.
All right.
So I don't know if you had this growing up, but growing up, we had this bottle of suntan lotion that was like this kind of like weird purple, maybe like liter large bottle. I think that my parents inherited it because I don't recall there ever being a time when this bottle wasn't in the picture. I'm pretty sure they're still using it.
Made with the finest 1960s asbestos.
Almost definitely. And the best part about the suntan lotion is at some point in the mid 1700s, sand got into this bottle. And like as a pasty white needing sunscreen kid, I hated having this sand oil rubbed onto me in the name of protecting my skin. It was like, you're basically killing me.
You're removing my skin to protect my skin.
There's no value here. So I think like maybe the problem isn't that bottle of sunscreen, but like how my parents held the sunscreen, how they rubbed it in. So maybe we have a humanoid robot that, you know, you can order on an app and it will come over to you and rub sunscreen into your shoulders.
I can think of no more simple and economically viable use case
I mean,
for
like,
humanoid robots on a beach.
I mean, like if you go to a beach, like in like a developing country, there's often a guy who's like going to sell you a bottle of sunscreen for $10.
Yep.
Like remove that job. There's like there's a shortage, obviously, of sunscreen hawkers.
Beach hawkers. Yeah.
Let's replace that with a robot.
All right.
So like probably this doesn't have to be at every beach. Like I'm thinking just like the big super beaches. So like Venice Beach in LA, Bondi Beach in Sydney, like the types of beaches that like a couple thousand people go to at once.
Okay.
I think that you could just like let someone order it on their phone. Like it doesn't have to be roaming hawking.
Okay.
Maybe some signs up that say like, here's a QR code.
Okay.
Get this robot to bring you sunscreen. Then the robot finds you. Step one, NBD.
Oh, you just send your geolocation from your phone.
I mean, that's only accurate to like 100 meters.
Yeah, but the robot will just step through people in the way. So the only person who doesn't run out of the path is the one you're looking for.
The robot would have to find a seek and sunscreen mode.
Exactly.
And to walk and scan through people and do facial recognition.
Here's a better option. When you tell the robot to come find you, you preload a song the robot's going to play. And so like Baywatch is just going to play all the time for this running robot.
I have an annoyingly possible real thing.
Okay.
You have to take a panorama picture around you.
Okay.
And it localizes off of the blankets.
Off the blankets.
Like I'm about 50 meters away from the koi blanket, 100 meters away from the red and white stripes blanket, and 14 meters away from like the blanket that was sold at a tourist trap called South of the Border in South Carolina in 1984.
Yeah. So that we need a blanket recognition system too.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay.
Yeah. That does not seem like the hardest problem.
Yeah.
In this beach robot.
Yep.
But like localized by the nearby blankets.
All right.
So then it walks over to you and it has to stoop down and probably offer you a bevy of sunscreen options and then rubs it into your shoulders.
Just the shoulders.
Your entire backside. Like it does your back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Backside and back are slightly different.
It's true. But all the places where if someone was to ask you to sunscreen their back, the robot does that.
Okay, so we need somewhat human compatible hands.
Yes.
Or are we going like the utilitarian route and it just basically has like silicone paddles?
I mean, I think
it's
just like
humanoid
robot
paddles on you.
I think outside of being really clever business ideas, humanoid robots need humanoid hands.
Oh, to get that sweet VC money?
Yeah, or just you count as a humanoid.
Yeah.
Like I haven't met any crab people. If so, ergo, you can't have claw hands as a humanoid robot.
So when
you can have crab robot has claw hands, but not humanoid.
We were just discussing this and we saw this great company. We're not going to mention the name, where they have a current viable robot which has a basically humanoid upper torso, is on wheels and has crude kind of claws.
Yeah.
But like all of that is what you need to build a real robot today.
Yep. And my headcanon is like you actually probably could just use this as a general purpose, like plug it into 120 volt power and do like a very simple automation task that could be reasonably universally programmable.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why humanoid robots are like existing at the moment.
But all these companies are like, but don't worry about this. This is just a prototype. Mm-hmm. Our real one is the one that's on legs and has fully humanoid hands. Mm-hmm. And we have a mock-up of it. It's a guy in a suit, but that doesn't matter. Like this is what we're working on right now.
So I think like
we need humanoid hands.
Yeah, we need humanoid hands. Maybe you could do like web slinging sorts of lotion dispenser, like kind of like Spider-Man. So like out of the palm comes the suntan lotion. Or he could just have a belt full of sunscreens that he then pours one out into his hand.
Yeah. I think the Peter Parker version is better option. Yeah, definitely.
So reaches down to your back. You've selected your sunscreen.
Yep.
Just actually could just hold out his hands.
Yeah, and just
spray sunscreen on your back.
Yep.
And then rubs it in.
I think version 1 is we use an aerosol type sunscreen. So like it can actually feasibly just aerosol you. And like it can actually do it.
I hate it when we get close to real ideas because that's
so much less fun.
That does seem conceivable.
Yeah, that seems actually doable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we still need a humanoid to walk in the sand.
Yeah,
and that still might break the whole business.
Because for listeners, if you're not aware, sand is extremely favorable to walking. If you've ever walked on a beach, you know how reasonable it is.
That's why it's so romantic.
Yeah,
because you're stumbling.
It's so nice to walk across.
No one looks more attractive than when they're tripping and falling into some kid's stupid hole that they dug, and their dirtbag parents didn't make them fill in.
And dug and is now flooding, so you have to deal with salt water too, which is famously healthy for electronics. So as this robot stumbles across the beach on the loose packed sand.
Do you know of a walking robot that can deal with sand? Like even in Boston Dynamics videos.
I bet Boston Dynamics could do it. Like
in a demo video.
Yeah. Like or not, they've dealt with harder stuff. One of my favorite videos that they do pretty repeatedly is they'll walk across loose boulders. And so as they're walking, the boulder slips out from under the foot and it catches itself and keeps going. So sand, I don't think would be that much of a challenge. Okay. It's just more of a jerk surface than like a production floor.
Yeah. I mean, you could just use treads to go through sand, which are pretty good at it, but then it wouldn't be humanoid.
No, exactly. Yeah.
It'd be a tank. It'd be a tank with hands.
Wheels are literally better in every possible way here, yet again. Yeah. But still,
Okay.
What if, no. Here's the thing. what if the beach is full of people? Like the beach is just full. Like it's very slow. So the robot has to figure out what the most efficient path is. The most efficient path might be walk out into the water, swim to the closest point, and then walk out again.
That actually might be. I mean, if you've been to some of these like super populous beaches,
the water's less full than the beach.
Because most people are there for the looks.
Yeah.
But I think it also might ruin the vibe if like some attractive little something is lying on the beach trying to look all good for the Insta, and then soaking wet robot appears over them and drips seawater all over them while Spider-Manning suntan lotion indiscriminately at the crowd.
I'm just imagining you're lying on the beach and you see this Terminator style thing emerge from the water
and start seeking through the whole crowd to localize and find its target.
Exactly.
To inoculate from the sun permanently.
Yeah. I think the upgrade option is it stands there with a parasol above you. Like it doesn't even dispense that, right?
If you spend an extra $20.
No. This is the super premium option. Because now the robot has to just stay there. He can't go serve anybody else, right? So like the cheap option is sunscreen. The expensive option is he stands there as your own little butler with your own little parasol.
Yeah, that could be a real thing for humanoid robots. Like where you have a humanoid robot just follow you with an offset.
Yeah, with a little parasol.
And carry a parasol for you. Like you're some sort of like, 19th century royalty.
One more reason everybody should read Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson for the neo-Victorian community, because they would love this.
All right, so we need a state-of-the-art humanoid robot. Call it $500,000 to 24 gallons of unicorn blood. Whichever one is harder to acquire is with a cost. Spraying sunscreen, not that hard.
No.
Building a unique beach towel localization system. I feel like that would be a fun, like, computer vision like PhD project.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that would take you a quarter to do okay.
That isn't ridiculous.
No, that's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's our next business.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably looking at something, it would have to sunscreen. It'd probably have to make $100,000 a month in sunscreen sales at $20 a pop. That's 5,000 people sunscreened a month. Yeah.
So that's
year round.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
That's at least feasible. Like this thing doesn't have to run from person to person.
It's probably busiest on the weekends.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. So you're compressing your demand.
So probably 500 people a weekend day. This could be a real business if you could build a humanoid.
If you could build a humanoid that doesn't trip
and there might be a global market for 40 of them.
Yep. Half of them in Dubai.
Sunscreen Bot 2000. Here we go.
Victorian auto butler.
So that being said, the thing that I hear from a lot of people who, haven't fallen into this whole little SaaS world of recurring revenue and pay 1,000 times for software you buy once or you start using once is, why can't I just pay a one-time price for software? Like, why do you need to keep doing work on it? Like, why doesn't it just work forever? How much do I need to pay you for it to just to work forever? And if you think about like other engineered devices, like a car, like, I don't know, a bottle opener or whatever, you expect to buy something once and then use it until it kind of falls apart or you get tired of it. Why isn't software that way? Like why doesn't software just work?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We were talking about this before. Like, I think my top level summary, which I'll start with and then we'll explain a little bit, is even NASA doesn't write code that way anymore for its interplanetary rovers. And you think of all places that you don't want to update software. A nuclear powered vehicle on Mars is probably one of the top, but even they will
so even it lands and it gets that like Windows thing of like mandatory updates, expected completion time 18 hours.
So if anybody remembers Word Clippy, there was an option to have a little robot. That's of course what I used when I was a child. That thing pops up on the robot's UI and just says, "It looks like you're trying to drive on Mars. Can I help you with that?" But no, so even very high performance systems with very strenuous requirements have moved to a constant update model.
But why? I mean, you think about software, 20, 40 years ago, like Pong, built it and it just worked.
Yeah.
Like Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yeah, that's my favorite example.
A guy just made and it like works.
Wrote it in assembly. Incredible.
What's that actually mean?
So assembly, everybody knows computers use binary.
Yep.
The one step above binary is assembly.
Zeros and ones.
Right. Zeros and ones. One step above that is assembly, which packages together commands that your CPU can execute. So if you ever look at assembly code, it's like peek at memory address, whatever, move byte from here to here, put it here, write, read, like really low level commands.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one step above binary. It's not even a real programming language. It's basically exactly what the CPU can do. You're telling it to do those things in sequence.
Yep.
It's extremely brittle because it depends on exact order of operations.
Yep.
So when you say go to line 1560, if you ever change your code, you have to update what line you're going to and what you're doing and what operation you're doing. The benefit of it is if you can write assembly well, it can be incredibly optimized.
Yeah.
And so that's what this guy did for Roller Coaster Tycoon is Roller Coaster Tycoon has a full physics engine that could work on a crappy laptop in 1996, which is just mind-blowing, right? Because it uses every single trick in the book.
Yep.
That's probably the last time we'll ever be able to do that as a society.
Why?
So
I mean,
modern
even like
software,
in robotics, like there's folks like Trimble who like will sell an auto steer system that can basically follow a straight line in a farmer's field.
Yeah.
And they sell it to you for a one-off price.
Yeah. So to answer that, like even the Roller Coaster Tycoon example, I downloaded on my Android phone a few years ago because I loved that game as a child. Played it on the phone for a little bit, forgot about it. Checked back in about a year ago. Not compatible with modern version of Android. So I paid for this app, can't use it anymore. Why? Well, because all of software is constantly improving and we're out of software complexity is now high enough that it's not feasible for one person to write a modern application entirely by themselves or even one team. One good example of this is like
digging into that, like why wasn't it compatible with a new version? Like wouldn't the new version of Android necessarily include all the old parts of Android?
No. Backward compatibility is a huge problem in software. The champions of backward compatibility, and I've talked about this before, is actually Microsoft.
Yep.
Microsoft puts in huge effort to make sure that code written
and that's why everyone loves
their
their Microsoft phones and like brags about their Microsoft laptops.
Totally. Yeah.
Because like I need to still use my 5-inch floppy.
Yeah. And just, well, that's a private matter. You probably shouldn't discuss that on the podcast. But realistically, you know, and your use of Microsoft Teams, which is your favorite.
Oh, it's the best software ever.
But they're the champions of actually enabling stuff to work even from that was written 30 years ago through compatibility options, through that kind of stuff. Even really large organizations like Apple, for example, who are famous for controlling everything in-house and rewriting everything in-house, will take an open source thing, understand it, decompile it, and rewrite it themselves, but still depend on bug fixes from upstream, from performance improvements for ideas, because it's just, we've written so much software, we've written so much foundation that it's impossible to maintain everything yourself. And so inevitably, some piece and some part that you depend on, even the operating system you depend on, some bug comes out or some security vulnerability like Heartbleed came out. And everybody has to update everything because it's foundational across a bunch of stack. And so you get the snowball effect. What if you have like an air-gapped computer like you could have on a robot that just never touches the internet? Yeah. Like, couldn't that software just work forever? Yeah, absolutely. But the problem there is, again, that means you're betting on writing the software correctly and feature completely basically the first time you touch it. So if you're deploying a robot for tilling, for example, you have to tell me that you're going to predict every possible failure mode of this software and just never touch it again. Very feasible for small things. Microcontrollers, small code, sure. When you get into something complex like robotics with machine vision involved, well, I mean, even outside of robotics, like what about? I mean, is it okay for solitaire but not for Word? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. There's that like, when does a pile of sand becomes a beach kind of thing, right? There's at some point where the project becomes complicated enough that you can't feasibly do it all yourself or even a team, and you're gonna depend on something which is gonna update. And you can choose not to update it. You can choose to keep an old version, but you're kind of signing up for pain. Every time programmers face a decision of, do I update to this new version and change my code, or do I just stick with the old version and hope that everything's okay? Unless you're in a real time crunch, the second option is bad, because eventually it stops being okay. Yeah. At some point you fall out of compatibility with some driver somewhere and you're stuck. And so this is like part of your argument is essentially
the reason why we moved from software that you bought in a box once from Best Buy to software that you put your credit card to and you have to pay for every month is not just because,
greedy capitalism.
It's more financially interesting to pay every month, but also just fundamentally because that software requires work every month.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want it to keep it updated, right? And again, like, yes, you can use Microsoft Excel from 1997, but honestly, Microsoft in particular is the exception to this rule because they employ, again, probably half of their workforce on just compatibility stuff.
Just making sure that
it works.
Excel 97 works on a 2022 computer.
Exactly.
Whereas, Word Perfect, or is Word Perfect Microsoft, or is Word?
No, somebody else.
So whereas Word Perfect or Lotus Notes would be no longer working.
Exactly. Or might even, right? There's a famous story how I think it was Windows XP included some fix to ensure that SimCity 1998 would work in Windows XP. They had to build some custom tooling for it. So maybe it does work, right?
Yeah.
But that's thanks to enormous effort on the part of Microsoft.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to robotics, so I think there's a couple of obvious parallels of why software doesn't just work when it's then also on a mechatronic device.
Yeah.
If Excel is having trouble or if Google Sheets is having trouble, obviously robots would too. But where else does it get much harder?
Yeah. So with a robot, the problem is you have a closed kind of one of the main things, the difference that I keep having to talk with software developers is robots isn't exactly like software because it's such a closed loop interlinked system. Your sensors impact how you plan, your planning impacts how you move, and your movement impacts what sensors you need. And so you got this kind of self-referring loop.
Yep.
And so as you change any piece of it, if you update your machine learning model, hopefully everything stays the same. But sometimes there's a fundamentally different way to do path planning. And when you implement that fundamentally different way to do path planning, everything else breaks. Or it's just suboptimal.
Or there's weird changes like for example, we just had a problem where a LiDAR wasn't working because the Ethernet port on the computer that our code is running on,
garbage.
That port itself broke.
Yeah.
And needing to if we had spent 20 years building perfect product that worked forever, and we switched how that Ethernet cable was talking through to going through a USB-C port, that might have required effort.
Yeah, and kind of the software.
There's so many more hardware variables that can change things where stuff just stops working. And the software community as a whole has kind of moved over the last, let's say, 20 years to this model where you just basically have an enforced release cycle, which forces everybody to keep away from code rot. So code rot is this idea where even if you have the source code might depend on an underlying library, which has since been updated. Yeah.
And so if you want to recreate exactly the way that it was before, you need to go and pull a bunch of dependencies, which themselves might be hard to find, have updated since. Docker kind of exists to help solve this a little bit.
That's part of why when we were talking about the end of Waymo trucking, why in a year or two,
exactly,
it might just be unrecoverable.
It's just useless. Exactly. And so an easy, in quotation marks, easy way to fight code rot is that you force kind of an upgrade cycle where you pull in the latest versions, you deprecate features, and you say, from Ubuntu 22.04, this version of this library is no longer compatible. You must switch to this other one. 20 and before will backport fixes. And again, Ubuntu as an OS and most OS suppliers will do backports. Well, they'll say, we found a bug in a new version. We're going to fix it in the old version as well, but we're only going to do this for the next 5 years.
Yep.
After that, it's done.
Yep.
You can keep using it, but there are known vulnerabilities and failures which we're not going to fix.
Yep.
And that's what happens, right? And so you can use this air gap robot, and maybe you're not worried about hackers, but eventually you're going to hit that bug.
Yeah. And eventually you're going to need some feature. Eventually some piece of compute hardware is going to be swapped out, and it's just going to break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like an interesting challenge with this for us as a company. In a number of markets, there's a bunch of incentives to buy capital equipment and depreciate it. So in agriculture, famously, basically as a farmer, you can write off from your income all of the money you spend on equipment. So if you buy a brand spanking new $250,000 tractor in 2023, you made $250,000 less that year, and you just don't owe taxes on that money, and that's just fine.
Yeah.
And that's great for tractor OEMs. It's great for regular farmers. It's like a really good setup, but it's not really compatible with SaaS.
Yeah.
It's not really compatible with how you buy something and then A, need to pay for it over several years, and B, you don't get to fully depreciate it and then run it into the ground where, like, let's say that $250,000 tractor, its book value becomes 0 at year 5, and then you run it for another 5 years and you just have a free tractor and your cost of goods just goes down because you're no longer paying for a piece of vehicle of equipment.
Yeah, and coming back to the John Deeres and the Trimbles and those manufacturers, right? I'm sure that they have also transitioned to constantly updating. Like, it's not.
Famously, BMW recently had a whole thing that they pulled back from.
Yeah.
Good news for me that they tried to charge a subscription for heated seats.
Yeah.
And they had to decide to pull away from that. And the thought was actually that they could manufacture more cheaply if every car just had heated seats, and you only got it if you paid the subscription.
Yeah.
But like, yes, Trimble and Deere and Kubota.
I meant even the other direction.
Everyone's trying to get recurring revenue.
No. I meant maybe, but what I meant even from the engineering side is that internal to Deere, for example, or any Kubota, let's call it, their software teams are already rolling software like this.
Yeah.
Because it's not sane not to do it this way anymore. And so when they sell a one-time product, really what they're doing is they're saying, here's my rolling software stack. I'm going to cut a release at this point.
Yep.
And this release will go to this vehicle.
Yep.
And if it ever breaks, we're going to do a recall or something and update it to the next version. So they're still doing the same thing. They're just charging differently for it.
Yeah.
They're still doing it.
And they might be factoring in,
exactly.
Instead of charging $100 a year for 5 years, they're charging you $500 up front or $450 up front so they can make interest on it.
Exactly.
And that funds that future development.
Yeah. Or you buy the vehicle, but then you also buy a maintenance package, and the maintenance package underneath also includes software fixes.
There's few things I hate. Like people hating the idea of recurring software fees, but being okay with maintenance packages,
which are the same thing.
Yes, I hate. Like, it feels so close to directly lying to a customer. Like, listen, we'll let you buy a one-time price. The one-time price is 3x the annual price. Then you're going to buy a maintenance fee that is the same as the annual price. You're welcome that we did this for you.
Yeah, yeah, and again, somebody's going to say, well, if you really wrote your software well, you could do it right the first time, or you spend enough time in R&D and testing in that to really polish it. Yes, you can. Even NASA doesn't do it that way anymore, right?
And NASA has unlimited budget for no robots. They have $200 million of budget for a robot at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like much bigger than any robotics company.
Yep.
Car manufacturers are the other one where there's very high bar of quality for auto deployed stuff. And they too will have bug fixes and firmware updates and whatever.
Which famously they'll often need to recall whole sets of cars for.
Exactly.
For things that are just software updates that you could fix via over-the-air updates. Many of them have to physically have vehicles brought back to them.
Yeah, I think it's because the alternative is even worse. There's a famous, I think Wired did a piece on this, where some GM vehicles with OnStar would have an open key and open port.
Oh, geez.
And if you just drove by the car with the correct wireless adapter, you could log in, remotely update the entertainment system, which would then give you root access and then remotely control the brakes, the acceleration, the everything. Right. So like, that's even worse.
Well, I mean, there's that, but I think like a story I heard in like 2016, 2015 was how I think like Fiat Chrysler at the time, now Stellantis, had to spend like $3 billion on a recall for a mapping UI error.
Yeah.
That like could have I'm not talking core security update concerns. I'm talking like, oh, these buttons don't look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that's a thing that costs a lot of money from a just updating perspective, or maybe the mapping feature stopped working properly if you did a certain type of error in a row.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, maybe for us as a company, we do shift if it's really demanding to a support fee or a maintenance fee or whatever. But it's the same thing.
I just hate the idea of lying to customers.
I agree.
Even if they want to be lied to.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's, I mean, the fundamental thing is the way that you build software now is that it's built on top of so many other components that you have to update it constantly and forever.
Yeah.
And kind of fundamentally, that's just how software works. And either you're charging a one-time fee and you're swallowing the risk of those long-term costs, or you are charging recurring revenue. And like maybe there's things that you can do if someone needs to, you know, do clever tax depreciation stuff where you let them prepay 5 years or something, and then they can do their taxes however they need to. But yeah, fundamentally, it's all the same bag of nuts.
Yeah, and as much as I'd love to think that robotics will someday get mature enough that we don't need to, none of the rest of our software has done this.
Yeah, it seems,
and so it'd be so
software
weird.
only gets more complex as time goes on.
Right, it gets more complex, it gets more powerful.
Yep.
So it'd be so weird if arguably one of the more difficult cases for software somehow exceeded.
It feels more likely
software.
that we'll lease all hardware than we will pay one time for robots.
Yeah, exactly.
Which might be why RAS was such a popular business model.
Yeah, it was.
Well, on that note, Ilia, what do you want to talk about next week?
I think we're going to talk about small robots.
Yeah. Yeah, we had two possible topics for today. One was why doesn't software just work? And the other was why is it so damn hard to make small robots? So hopefully we'll actually talk about that next week, or maybe it'll be 3 weeks, or maybe it'll be tomorrow. Could be any.
On that note,
see you all next time.
See you next time.